You're listening to the Dynamic Thinking Project podcast. This is episode 18, and today's topic is cognitive dissonance. So let's get to it. Hey everyone, Adam Muselli here. Welcome to the Dynamic Thinking Project podcast. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. This podcast is released every Friday, and show notes are found at the website themindtechinstitute.com. It's all one word. Come back often and feel free to add this podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. All links are in the show notes and website. And now, let's get started. The reason I have chosen this topic today, because in the upcoming episodes, we are going to be diving into some really bizarre phenomena. And that isn't only one phenomenon, but I mean phenomena, and that's plural. I'm talking about things such as alien abductions, missing time, absentia, the Mandela or quantum effect, and other strange things. Now, I know some people might think, oh, really? Well, yeah, really. Because we have to be fair with the way we look at things here. And in order to understand at least a glimpse of such phenomena, we must understand what cognitive dissonance is to be able at least to differentiate between a playful imagination, an influence or influences, an idea, and a fact. And that's actually what we teach our counseling, hypnotherapy, and NLP students, to be open-minded, to be fair and not to dismiss things based on their opinion and belief systems. And if you are interested in becoming a qualified counselor, hypnotherapist, or NLP practitioner, you can simply study all that now online. All you have to do is just go to the mindtechinstitute.com or mti.edu.au. So going back to the main subject, cognitive dissonance refers to a situation involving conflicting attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. This produces a feeling of discomfort, leading to an alternation in one of the attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors, just to reduce the discomfort and restore balance. For example, when people smoke, which is a behavior, and they know, I'm going to emphasize again, they know that smoking is harmful and may cause cancer. Now, knowing is cognition. So cognitive dissonance is the feeling of an uncomfortable tension which comes from holding two conflicting thoughts in the mind at the same time. Dissonance increases with the importance of the subject to us, how strongly the dissonant thoughts conflict, and our inability to rationalize and explain away the conflict. Dissonance is often strong when we believe something about ourselves and then do something against that belief. For example, if you believe that you're a good or decent person, but do something bad, then the discomfort you feel as a result is cognitive dissonance. Now, I won't say the feeling of guilt because that's another topic, but yes, guilt can be a motivator leading to cognitive dissonance, or the other way around. Cognitive dissonance is a very powerful motivator, which will often lead us to change one or other conflicting belief or action. The discomfort often feels like a tension between the two opposing thoughts. Now, to release the tension, we can take one of three actions. The first one is to change our behavior. The second one is to justify our behavior by changing the conflicting cognition. And the third one is to justify our behavior by adding new cognitions. But of course, in therapy, especially in counseling, NLP, and hypnotherapy, we use other techniques such as parts integration, the STEM therapy, and others. And of course, if you would like to learn more about that or become a qualified hypnotherapist, counselor, or NLP practitioner, you can visit our website, themindtechinstitute.com. And once again, all that can be studied online. Moving on, dissonance is most powerful when it's about our self-image. You see, the feelings of foolishness, immorality, and so on, including internal projections during decision-making, are dissonance in action. If an action has been completed and cannot be undone, then the after-the-effect dissonance compels us to change our beliefs. If beliefs are moved, then the dissonance appears during decision-making, forcing us to take actions we would not have taken before. Cognitive dissonance appears in virtually all evaluations and decisions and is the central mechanism by which we experience new differences in the world. You see, when we see other people behave differently to our images of them, when we hold any conflicting thoughts, we experience dissonance. Dissonance increases with the importance and impact of decision, along with the difficulty of revising it. And of course, the discomfort about making the wrong choice of buying a car is bigger than when choosing a cover for your cell phone to buy. Festinger in 1957, who was a psychologist, he came up with this theory called cognitive dissonance theory. He suggested that we have an inner drive to hold all our attitudes and beliefs in harmony and avoid disharmony or dissonance. Attitudes may change because of factors within the person. You see, an important factor here is the principle of cognitive consistency, which was the focus of Festinger's in 1957's theory of cognitive dissonance. This theory starts from the idea that we seek consistency in our beliefs and attitudes in any situation where two cognitions are inconsistent. Also, Leon Festinger in 1957 proposed cognitive dissonance theory, which states that a powerful motive to maintain cognitive consistency can give rise to irrational and sometimes maladaptive behavior. When Festinger first developed the theory to explain how members of cult who were persuaded by their leader, a certain Mrs. Kish, that the earth was going to be destroyed on the 21st of December, and that they alone were going to be rescued by aliens, actually increased their commitment to the cult when this didn't happen. Festinger himself has infiltrated the cult and would have been very surprised to meet with some aliens. The dissonance of the thought of being, of course, so nonsensical was so great that instead they revised their beliefs to meet with obvious facts, which were that the aliens had, through their concern for the cult, saved the world instead. So, according to Festinger, we hold many cognitions about the world and ourselves when they clash. An inconsistency when they clash, an inconsistency evoked, resulting in a state of tension known as cognitive dissonance. And as the experience of dissonance is unpleasant, we are motivated to reduce or eliminate it and achieve consent or agreement. Now, how attitude change does take place? Well, according to the cognitive dissonance theory, there is a tendency of individuals to seek consistency among their, for example, beliefs, opinions. Now, when there is an inconsistency between attitudes or behaviors, which is dissonance, sometimes we must change to eliminate the dissonance. And in an intriguing experiment, Festinger and Carlsmith in 1959 asked participants to perform a series of dull or boring tasks, such as turning pegs into pegboard for an hour. As you can imagine, participants' attitudes toward this boring task were highly negative. Festinger and Carlsmith in 1959 investigated if making people perform a dull task would create cognitive dissonance through forced compliance behavior. You see, in their laboratory experiment, they used 71 male students as participants to perform a series of those dull tasks, such as turning pegs into pegboard for an hour. They were then paid either $1 to $20 to tell a waiting participant, a Confederate, that the tasks were really interesting. Almost all the participants agreed to walk into the waiting room and persuade the participants that the boring experiment would actually be fun. Now, the results were, when the participants were asked to evaluate the experiment, the participants who were paid only $1 rated the tedious task as more fun and enjoyable than the participants who were paid $20 to lie. And of course, the conclusion was, being paid only $1, it's not sufficient incentive for lying. And so those who were paid $1 experienced dissonance. They could only overcome the dissonance by coming to believe that the tasks really were interesting and enjoyable. Being paid $20 provides a reason for turning pegs, and there is, therefore, no dissonance. So, how about in decision making? As you know that life is filled with decisions, and decisions, as a general rule, arouse dissonance. For example, suppose you had to decide whether to accept a job in an absolutely beautiful area of the country, or turn down the job so you could be near your friends or family or your loved ones. Now, either way, you would experience dissonance. If you took the job, you would miss your loved ones. If you turned down the job, you would pine for the beautiful streams, mountains, and valleys. Both alternatives have their good and bad points. The rub is that making a decision cuts off the possibility that you can enjoy the advantages of the unchosen alternative. Yet, it assures you that you must accept the disadvantages of the chosen alternative. You see, people have several ways to reduce dissonance that is aroused by making a decision, according to Festinger in 1964. One thing they can do is to change the behavior, as you remember earlier. This is often very difficult. So people frequently employ a variety of mental maneuvers. A common way to reduce dissonance is to increase the attractiveness of the chosen alternative and decrease the attractiveness of the rejected alternative. This is referred to as spreading apart the alternatives. Also, Brehm in 1956 was the first to investigate the relation between dissonance and decision-making. Female participants were informed they would be helping out in a study funded by several manufacturers. Participants were also told that they would receive one of the products at the end of the experiment to compensate for their time and efforts. The woman then rated the desirability of 8 household products that ranged in prices from $15 to $30. The products included a coffee maker, an electric sandwich grill, a toaster, and a portable radio. So participants in the control group were simply given one of the products because these participants didn't make a decision. They didn't have any dissonance to reduce. Individuals in the low dissonance group chose between a desirable product and one rated 3 points lower on an 8-point scale. Participants in the high dissonance condition chose between a highly desirable product and one rated just 1 point lower on the 8-point scale. After reading the reports about the various products, individuals rated the products again. Participants in the high dissonance condition spread apart the alternatives significantly, more than they did the participants in the other 2 conditions. In other words, there were more likely participants in the other 2 conditions to increase the attractiveness of the chosen alternative and to decrease the attractiveness of the unchosen alternative. Now, effort also seemed to be the case that we value most highly those goals or items which have required considerable effort to achieve. You see, this is probably because dissonance would be caused if we spent a greater effort to achieve something and then evaluated negatively. We could, of course, spend years of effort into achieving something which turns out to be a load of trash, and then in order to avoid the dissonance that produces, we really try to convince ourselves that we didn't really spend years of effort, or that the effort was really quite enjoyable, or that it wasn't really a lot of effort. In fact, though, it seems we find it easier to persuade ourselves that what we have achieved is worthwhile, and that's what most of us do. Evaluating highly something whose achievement has cost us much, whether people think it's much or not, this method of reducing dissonance is known as effort justification. And if you go back to episode 4, those who paid so much for a motivational seminar, we're talking about $10,000 and above, they usually convince themselves by justifying the effort of paying much or the effort of the person they attended his or her seminar. So, if we put effort into a task which we have chosen to carry out, and the task turns out badly, we experience dissonance. And to reduce this dissonance, we are motivated to try to think that the task turned out well, or the seminar or the product was good. Also, there is a classic dissonance experiment was conducted by Aronsons and Mills in 1959. They demonstrate the basic idea. And the aim of that experiment is to investigate the relationship between dissonance and effort. The method of the experiment was female students were volunteered to take part in a discussion on the psychology of sex. And in this mild embarrassment condition, participants read aloud to a male experimenter a list of sex-related words like virgin and prostitute. In this severe embarrassment condition, they had to read aloud obscene words and a very explicit sexual passage. In a control condition, they went straight into the main study. In all the conditions, they then heard a very boring discussion about sex in different animals. They were asked to rate how interesting they had found the discussion. and how interesting they had found the people involved in it. And the results were participants in the severe embarrassment condition gave the most positive rating. And the conclusion, if a voluntary experience which has cost us a lot of effort turns out badly, dissonance is reduced by redefining the experience as interesting. This justifies the effort made. Now, critical evaluation. There has been a great deal of research into cognitive dissonance, providing some interesting and sometimes unexpected findings. It's a theory with very broad applications, showing that we aim for consistency between attitudes and behaviors, and may not use very rational methods to achieve it by scientific means, and I mean experiments. However, and just to be fair here, there is a problem from a scientific point of view, because we cannot physically observe cognitive dissonance, and therefore we cannot objectively measure it, which is behaviorism. Consequently, the term cognitive dissonance is somewhat subjective. There is also some ambiguity or vagueness about the term dissonance itself. It's a perception, as cognitive suggests, or a feeling about perception. And Aaron's revision of the idea of dissonance as inconsistency between a person's self-concept and cognition about their behavior makes it seem likely that dissonance is really nothing more than guilt. There are also individual differences in whether or not people act as this theory predicts. Highly anxious people are more likely to do so. Many people seem able to cope with considerable dissonance and not experience the tensions the theory predicts. Finally, many of the studies supporting the theory of cognitive dissonance have low ecological validity. For example, turning pegs, as in Festing's experiment, is an artificial task that doesn't happen in everyday life. Also, the majority of the experiments used students as participants, which raised the issue of a biased sample. So, could we generalize the results from such experiments? I will leave that to you to decide. Also, could all these changes that we see and other people actually see related to the phenomenon of the Mandela effect or quantum effect, which we're going to have a whole episode or maybe more about it, could all these changes be nothing but a case of mass cognitive dissonance, for example? I mean, really, this Mandela effect is spooky as hell, but that would be for a very soon episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can email me. The email is on our website, themindtechinstitute.com. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, especially if you are listening to this episode on YouTube. The Dynamic Thinking Project podcast is released every Friday. Until next time, take care and enjoy your weekend. This is Adam Muselli, signing out.